can't hear it? Barely, we can hear it. Barely? Oh, no.
So faint.
Oh. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I hear the music was a little too quiet there. Oh, well, we tried to play the Star Wars theme song since today's May 4th, so may the 4th be with you. I got the first one. I got the first dad joke of the day. That was for you, Tim. So per usual, we're going to take a few minutes before the guys come up to do some updates on Gentian, let you know kind of what we're going to go over today. Hopefully we've all had the chance to meet. If not, I'm Peter Nordenberg. This is Ashley Neuwirth, Lisa Sheridan. We're the three you get to hear from this morning. First off, today's agenda. First, again, you'll hear from us. We'll go through an update on Gentian. Next, we'll talk about the markets, the economy, market corrections. You may have noticed there's a few things going on right now. So we'll touch on those. Then we'll go over some financial planning topics and ideas. And then finally, Chris was participating in the Abundance 360 Summit about 3 weeks ago. So he's going to go through all the technology updates, new things that he heard about there that will be very exciting moving forward.
I just wanted to point out a couple of upcoming things. Next week, Wednesday, we will have our next bi-weekly update. So if you have not joined us via Zoom for a bi-weekly update in the past, please check out your bulletin from your weekly emails from Gentian, and you can join us there and click to register. Again, this is a bi-weekly thing, so the 11th as well as the 25th is when we'll host those bi-weekly updates. On Wednesday, May 18th, we will host our next Ladies in Gentian. I know some faces in here have not joined our Ladies in Gentian before, so please check out that bulletin and register to check it out. We will have a herbs and a horticulturist from the Milwaukee County Domes actually joining us to educate us on all things plants, gardening, and herbs. So please check that out and join us on May the 18th. We will host our next May birthday club. So if any of you are celebrating a birthday in the month of May, we invite you to come to the Gentian Hall for a lunch so we can celebrate you. And again, that will be on Wednesday, May the 25th, right at our Gentian office. So please make sure to register. That's also on the bulletin, and you can sign up online if you'd like to join us. Market will be closed as well as our office for Memorial Day on Monday, May the 30th. And just to save the date for June birthdays, if there's any in the room, June the 15th, we will be hosting the June celebration for that. If you haven't already subscribed to our Gentian YouTube page, I invite you to go to YouTube, search Gentian Financial, and again, if you haven't already subscribed, there's a red square on the top right corner of your screen when you go to YouTube, and subscribe. That way you get the latest content anytime we have a new video released, a bi-weekly update in case you missed it. If you miss a forum like this, or if you just want to look back and look at a replay, they are all available right on YouTube on our Gentian page.
All right. So everybody, most of the clients here I know have client access. And now you can set up going paperless. Some of you do already, but it's quite easy. You can go and navigate what you want send in paper, statements, taxes, or you can just get everything sent via e-delivery, and you'll get sent an email once you've signed up that you've got some notifications in there, and you can just go in and look at your own time. You don't have to waste paper, and you don't have to have all that mailings every month. So just go into your client access and click on the notifications, and you can set it up to do all your paperless.
And if you do set up paperless or you continue to get paper statements, we do have access to any document that Raymond James sends you via paper or email. So if you lose track of an email or a printed statement, always email us. We'll be able to pull that up for you if you need to find it.
And also, whoever has client access can also access the Vault, which is a great tool that Raymond James has come up with now to be able to safely send us statements, documents, anything that you want the financial advisor or the team to look at. It's very secure and it's very easy to use once you're in the client access. You can upload anything that you want and that you want us to have access. We get notified that you've uploaded something, and same vice versa. We can upload something to your client access and you'll get notified, and then that's just a secure way, other than us sending emails with an attachment and a code and all of that. It's just an easier way. So
Lisa, do you mind if I jump in?
Sure.
What I learned about Vault is that it's a great place to store, so for insurance purposes, for example, you can go around your house, take pictures of all your belongings in case of an accident or a horrific situation. You can upload those pictures or a video of your whole house and just have that safe place, and you don't need a huge storage to use up on your personal device. You can drop it here and delete it from your personal device. So just an option for another use of Vault.
There's no limit to the space that you can utilize in that area, so it's great. It's a great place.
So I mentioned that Chris participated in the Abundance 360 Summit a few weeks ago. That's just part of the continuing education that the entire team does in order to provide better service and experience for you. For example, next week, Thursday and Friday and Saturday, Chris and Ken will be at Ed Slott's Master Elite Advisor Program. Ed's the foremost IRA expert in tax planning. The following week, a handful of us will be in Nashville for Raymond James' National Conference for Professional Development. That same week, Zach will be participating in the Academy for Preferred Financial Advisors conference. Earlier this year, I was able to participate in the invitation-only Elite Wealth Advisor Symposium. The nice thing about that is it's not just Raymond James advisors, so you learn from all different advising firms in the industry. And then every quarter, we do participate in Empowered Wealth, which I know we've talked a lot about during your meetings. You will notice that there are table cards on each table with a little QR code. The lovely ladies are going to show you how this works, but if you have a smartphone and you open up your camera and just put that within the view, a link will pop up that will take you to a survey for today. We'd appreciate if you take a couple minutes to fill that out. Let us know what's working, what's not, what you'd like to hear about, so we can continue to provide you a better experience during these forums. Finally, I'm going to bring up the main speakers today. A few of you maybe remember that when Zach started with us, he was not allowed to have his own microphone. He had to work his way into that. So today you will hear from Chris, Ken, and Zach, but you'll also hear from Mike. But he doesn't have his picture today. So hopefully next time he'll have it up there. So make sure you comment about how great of a job Mike does today in your survey also. So without further ado, please join us in welcoming Chris Doty, Ken Flannery, Zach DeBoer, and Mike Mann.
Really enjoy having the team. They're fantastic. What I'm most proud about is their growth as leaders, how they serve you. What I've found over time is I'm able to get into a lot of groups and bring a lot of really fantastic information back. But the cool thing is watching everybody here disseminate it and the things they bring. So the mix has really been fantastic. It's called hybrid vigor, so it adds a lot to your experience, a ton to it. So what I'd like to do today is to kind of go through what we're going to go through here today. First thing you know is I like to go big. Anybody here know what going big is? Good. Good. You don't? Well, beginning in gratitude is the key. So what I want to do is I'm going to give you 90 seconds, but first I'll share my gratitude. I'm happy to be back here in person. I'm happy tomorrow that the 5th of May, which is always on the 5th, is Cinco de Mayo, and also more importantly, it's Deb Doty's birthday. So she's not here today, but we celebrate her birthday tomorrow, which is one of the most important holidays in our house. So that usurps it as well. So what's that?
You don't mean one of the, you mean the most.
Yes, as Tom said, Debbie, you can probably hear that on the recording. Tom said the most important day. That's what I meant to say, Tom. Thank you for covering for me for that one. I totally agree as well. Every day is fantastic. And then Mother's Day on Sunday as well, which is fantastic. I'll be in Washington, D.C. all 4 days with my daughter's 8th grade Washington, D.C. trip. So I'll be walking 25,000 steps from 7 a.m. till 10:30 p.m. every single day. So and when I'm there, if you guys want me to talk to any politicians, I'm sorry. So that'll be your job. But what I'd like you to do is, in a moment here, is be prepared, get your pen out and all. But I'd like to share first. Ken, how about your Go Big?
Sure, absolutely. Maybe some of you have heard, so I'm going to start off with a joke here, that during the recent Dave Chappelle show, that someone got up on stage and tackled him, right? Did you see that? So the markets are down right now, right? You know that. Don't come up here and tackle us today, okay? All right? Please don't. I want to say Happy Mother's Day, of course. Chris just said it beautifully, so Happy Mother's Day to all of you out there. I'm grateful for my dad. He just turned 72. So my grandpa would have been 102. My dad is 72. I'm 42, and I messed it up. And there's 31 years between my kids and myself, so I messed it up. But my dad should have talked to a lot of you, but he retired 5 years ago. And he is a different man. He is easygoing. The stress has gone away. Because a lot of you have been retired for 10, 15, 20 years. You should have been in his ear about 20 years ago. It would have been a little easier on me. But no, he's really grateful. He's really gentle with the kids, the grandkids. It's really nice. So I just want to say grateful for his birthday, and it's good to be part of his life. So.
No, I really love being here at Blue Mountain. This was where my first day was over 4 years ago. So it's great to be back with you guys. And I also celebrated my birthday on Saturday. Absolutely. And I'm just extremely humbled and blessed for the people in my life, with you guys, with my family, with Gentian family, and all the friends I have as well.
Absolutely.
And you've got a mic now.
And a mic.
That's right,
Yep.
and he's standing right over there.
Yeah.
That's a dad joke. Yep, I got that one as well. What's the shortest month of the year? Anybody know? May. There's only 3 letters. So I appreciate that. I love sharing the gratitude. What it does is it lifts up. How many people had a super positive day to begin with? Most people might have done something, but what I want to do is you might have something that has been facing you. I don't know if you've heard the news. I think the Fed is going to wait until we're done to hear what we've said to talk about rates. Just so you know, I wanted to make sure you weren't worried about that as we went through as well. But I love the going big portion of what we do. I think gratitude is at the center. The world needs more of it. So if you ever get a chance, our journal, wherever you are, around a table with some friends, start with saying, hey, let's start tonight having dinner, talking about one thing we're grateful for, and just go around the table. It's a ton of fun. So I want to offer that to you. So what we're doing, and this is planning and discussions and research, market research, portfolio due diligence, continuing education. I'm going to bring Mike up here in just a second and talk about some of the things. A lot of you are sending your kids and grandkids to talk with us to get a start. It's what we built the team for. So we've got some members of our team. We're just going to talk about a few items that might be of supreme interest to you, like college debt. Anybody heard about that? Yeah, exactly. It's having that house when you get out of college, you still make payments for it, but you can't live in. But also we're going to talk about COI meetings. And Ken, what are COIs?
They stand for Centers of Influence, our partners.
Centers
Tax,
of Influence.
Estate planning, insurance, real estate. So just to get a feel for what's happening in the market so we can better serve you all with that information.
So we look at all the professionals you work with, and that's what Ken said. One of the big things was, on your insurance, make sure you have replacement value. Because today, anybody heard about a 2x4 being $11? Anybody experienced that? My statement is, why don't you take a 4x8 and just cut it in 2, and then... Byron said that doesn't work. So anyway, I tried to come up with an idea to save money. Also the clients and meetings calls, and that's what we spend a preponderant amount of our time on, is right here with you. So I want to go through a few of those, but before I do, Mike, why don't we bring you up and talk a little bit about some of the things you've been hearing. You'll normally hear Mike talk about the investments with Ryan and a lot of that we've handled, but this is a very, very interesting topic that Mike has been working on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chris. So normally, my role has been expanding here at Gentian, and it's been great. I've gotten to know a lot of you a lot better. I actually recognize people as they're coming through the door. I've been able to have dinner with a couple of you, and it's just been phenomenal. But one of the biggest privileges lately has been able to work with the young investors, your kids, your grandkids, help them start saving early so that they can be in the same position you are right now. And some of the great questions that we're getting circle around student loans. And what I've noticed studying a little bit more about it and personally being involved with student loans is that there's a waiver right now. This administration is allowing for a waiver until October 31st. And this is going to be for all of the public servants, all the people who work for nonprofits, people who do extremely important jobs that might not get the compensation that they truly deserve. And what that waiver is that anybody who's familiar with the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program means that somebody who works for a nonprofit, is a school teacher, police officer, their student loans get forgiven after 10 years of that service. But you have to apply for it to be able to get that. A lot of people don't know that. So they think that just working 10 years and then applying for that forgiveness, well, I worked for a qualified employer for this amount of time. I made all my payments on time. I'm ready to get my loans forgiven. They can't. So there has been a huge percentage of people who've been denied that right of having their loans forgiven. But what this administration is doing for those people until October 31st is that they can apply for a waiver to get all those payments that didn't qualify previously qualify. So anybody who has been working in their industry for 10 years, who previously couldn't get those loans forgiven, people who don't make that extravagant wage or something, but are providing a service that is honestly sometimes a lot more important than some of those high-income earners, they are now able to get credit for those payments and get their loans forgiven faster. So if you know anybody who works in an industry like that, please let them know that this waiver exists. We don't talk about a ton of stuff, but when something's urgent, we want to bring it to your attention. And I believe that this is something that makes a huge difference in somebody's life. And anybody with student debt, I heard a lot of new college grads, and maybe they don't have student loans, but if they know somebody who does, I'm happy to talk to them about it. Something that can really affect somebody's life is the pressure of feeling like they have to make these payments, which they do, but there's ways of making those payments that kind of relieves that stress. And truly, having anxiety over that, there's so much else to worry about in life. So if we can relieve just one little thing, I'm happy to do so.
I think one of the questions Mike got is a nonprofit also a person? It was one of the college kids, and the answer was no. No, that was not the case. But Aurora is a nonprofit, right? So one of our clients recently applied for this, received it. He'd worked there for 13 years, and he had a fairly significant amount. Was it how much was the debt?
$70,000.
$70,000 forgiven, as he'd been there for 13 years. So this works. So make sure you know that that's there and that's available. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for bringing that up. So the questions we're hearing from you, we decided we'd make this more focused on not just we want to tell you, but we'll give you some of that and some of the history that we want to show you in perspective. But more importantly, what kind of questions are we hearing from you? And then we're going to allow for you to ask questions. So we'll try to keep the first portion a little shorter because the second portion will have kind of a roundtable discussion about tech. But here's the questions we're hearing right now. We can add more in, but how can we protect against inflation? Anybody concerned with that? A little bit. I see that. 3 hands went up. How is Ukraine impacting the markets? I flipped that around. How is Russia impacting the markets with Ukraine? So you can see it either way. How much longer will this correction last? Ken knows. How much? What should I do with my cash reserves? Why do my bonds have a negative return? And why do all your friends' bonds have negative return? Why were my capital gains so high in 2021, or can I afford to retire? I'll step in with the capital gains one right now. 2021. Anybody heard of companies like Amazon? Apple, Meta or Facebook. So when managers bought those 10 and 12 years ago and haven't sold them, they've increased massively in price. So when they do have to sell them because they become too big or there's a market correction, that creates a massive capital gain when they bought it at 1 and now it's at 200. So what happens in there, they're required to distribute those capital gains to us. And in a year like last year, there weren't a lot of losses they could offset that with. Now, in a year like 2018, you had some capital gains, but in the December month, the market took a 19% correction. So we were able to actually sell some positions at a loss, replace them with one of our funds that we also thought was a great fund in that category, and then use that to offset your capital gains. Last year wasn't one of those years. So we're constantly looking for ways to minimize those, but we also look at the long-term picture. Would you rather pay capital gains when they're at record historical lows, or at some point in the future where they may be double what they are? Anybody have an answer to that? Nobody? Okay, good. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to have you pay all my capital gains at whatever rate. No. So we're always looking to optimize those for you as well. Looking at that portion on here, it was an interesting year, but remember, also in correction years, like 2010, for some of you were with me, or 2009, also in 2000, there were years where the market was down significantly, and you still got capital gains, and you wondered how. Because it's a lagging effect. So it's about a year or so after the run, you'll still get capital gains. You don't start getting capital losses and no capital until probably 1 to 2 years into the next bull run, then you'll start seeing capital gains again. So it's a lagging indicator. I want to bring it up. It's a lot of conversations you probably had with us, but it's something you've asked questions about because a lot of you are coming in with your tax returns going, man, I owed money. We say if the portfolio generated it, the portfolio should also pay for it. So also think about that and come to us and talk about it as well. Okay? Any questions on that one? I just wanted to cover that one quick. So let's get to the questions that you guys have for us overall. But before we do that, Time Magazine is a great cover. If you take a look at some of the articles up here, this one here is about oil and where it's over a barrel, inflation, interest rate issues. There's hard times here. There's often things about China, Russia. There's things all going on in this. And you take a look at this. It's interesting. As you look at the covers of these are from 1980. So the thing I tell you is, If you study enough economic history, fortunately, some of the geeks in this room do. It's an amazing thing to see the cycle repeat over and over again. And the fun thing is to offer that perspective. When you look at these, I've got one that has 12 titles, and every single thing we're talking about today is from 1958 to today, could be used as pertinent as now. The difference today is you no longer read Time magazine, right? Back then, it was one news story, one newspaper, and Time magazine. That's all there was, really. Today, the same news story, just one, is broadcast how many times? An infinite number. So exposure is, oh my gosh, it's happening all over. Well, it's just one thing that happened, but you heard it 1,000 times. So at any rate, interesting to go through. Let's bring Zach up and talk about some of the economic indicators. We're going to take a deep 20-minute dive into this chart.
Exactly right. Exactly wrong. But one thing that Chris mentioned there with news, they give us the recency bias, right? This has never happened before. So one thing that we wanted to do was just to take a look at where things are relative to their historical values. We'll look at a few market indicators and also economically as well. If we're starting at the top, I got good at this yesterday in Appleton, by the way, so I'm right on the money. So if we're looking at the bar in each of these lines, that's where they've typically been. So if we're looking at market volatility, where it is currently as of April is right within typical range as well. If we're looking at the 10-year Treasury yield, we're a little bit lower than normal. And one thing that people always wonder, and that we'll cover here later too, is just what to do with our outside cash. Is there anything that we can do to get a little bit better rate? We want to be cautious about extending that too far out. You'll start to see things about a fixed annuity for 3 or 4 or 5 years. We're still at historically low rates. We want to be more towards the short term as far as looking for yield. We don't want to extend too far out because there's a chance for these to continue to increase. If we're looking at yield spreads, we're still right in our historical values. When we're looking at home prices, this is the one that's a little bit outside of the norms. As you guys have seen, and especially in certain parts of the country, house prices are extremely high. You go to Phoenix or areas like that, $1 million home for someone in California is still fairly reasonable, right? And we see that around here as well.
But Zach, on that one, I just read an article today that the top 15 markets right now in America are down. Many of them are down 10% so far right now. They're actually having to reduce prices to sell for the first time in quite a while. So it just isn't. Things do hit peaks and troughs, but there is some hope, at least in home prices, in some of the major markets.
If we're looking at inflation, that's the kind of the hot topic that we've been hearing a lot about right now. In the short term, temporarily, it's outside of the normal. We're about at 7.91. Typical is about 2 or 3% less than that. Historically, it's been around 2 to 3% inflation. Unemployment, historically low. And down from 4.2% in the quarter of last year. If you guys remember from COVID, a massive recovery in unemployment. We were in the double digits and we're back down to 3.6% in unemployment. Economic expansion, we're right exactly towards historical norms. But yet, even though we're pretty close to historical norms or better in most cases, the consumer sentiment is historically low. So when you think about the news and the different information that we're hearing, we think things are so much worse than they have been ever before, where a lot of these are within their historical norms.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Zach. And we talk about consumer sentiment. It was interesting. On Monday, I was at home for a little while, turned on the news. I didn't want to see what all you watched during the day. CNBC? No one's watching CNBC, right?
Not anymore.
So I was in the hearth room watching this for like 10 minutes. My wife is in the kitchen. I have CNBC on. And she walks in literally after 10 minutes. She goes, "Is the world really that bad?" I kid you not. She's not really in tune with the financial markets and things of that nature. She handles the finances. She does give me an allowance, which is nice, but not really in tune with the overall markets, right? But really, when you look at the news like that, the sentiment that we're hearing right now is really bad. Every question that was asked during the interview, is that going to lead to a recession? Is that going to lead to a recession? Just because the Fed raises interest rates doesn't mean it's going to lead to a recession, right? Because demand is very high, which we'll talk about here in the next slide here, I believe. It's economic growth. We look at economic growth, 70% of our economy is based on what? Consumption, right? us buying things.
right.
So with the markets being down, did you all stop buying? What's going on here? No, it's really about consumption right now. So you look at homes, you look at autos, you look at anything that involves like an appliance. If you order an appliance, you don't have it probably yet if you wanted something special. There's a little bit of a wait. So demand is really, really great. How do we know that? Chris mentioned this yesterday, storage units, right? You look at storage units, they're going up everywhere. They're everywhere. Everywhere you drive, there's a storage unit. What does that mean? People are still consuming because they still have things that don't fit inside their own home. They need a storage unit for it, right? So demand is there. Now, the big question is going to be inflation. The big question is, what is the Federal Reserve going to do? What's their role? What's their role in all this, right? To have a soft landing? Is it going to be a deep landing when it happens? What is it? But inflation is going to be the one thing that we keep an eye on. And will consumers keep consuming? That's really the big question that happens out there. Have any of you walked away from a purchase because it was too high? Is that starting to happen? Mm-hmm. Starting to happen more and more, right? You look at something and you're like, nah, that's way too much, right? So that if that happens across America, that's what happens when demand goes down, and we'll see that here. High frequency data, can't really see that in the back, but this is comparing where things are today versus where they were basically during COVID timeframes. As you can imagine, consumer transactions are up. People are spending more money than they did 2 years ago. Hotels, travel in general. Dining is up, of course, right? Everything that you'd expect, we're starting to see that come through here. You look at RVs, you look at boats. Everything is, people are building garages, things of that nature. It's really happening right now. Look at Florida. I've heard so many stories about Florida. It's busy in Florida, to my understanding. Some people like it, some people don't. It's really interesting to see what's happening. But talk about high frequency, a lot of people going down to Florida right now. So
yeah, 300,000 people moved to Florida last year alone. That's a massive amount. Another thing I looked at for all of you who'd love to, I got a 74-page report of what people are clicking on the internet. It doesn't use names, so don't worry. But it was kind of fun to run through. What's up, what's down? Things are way down, things are way up, like Uber. People are looking at Airbnbs, hotels.com. Vacations are way up. Dating service is down. I guess during the COVID timeframe, people are no longer looking at Match.com. But that was down 11% or so. It was interesting to watch the websites and see what clicks were for this data. So we look at that just to see how it's pertinent sometimes. But more importantly, I think, as Ken mentioned, the most important thing here is inflation. But what I'd like to do, if I may, is stop the program for a moment. And I'm going to do a contest. Anybody here like contests? All right, we're going to sprint out to the first hole. No. I would like to ask and have a question, and we can just raise our hand or shout out. Who had the highest initial mortgage rate of anybody in the room when they bought their home back in the 70s and 80s, right there? You can yell it out. Anybody? 13? Anybody beat 13? 13? Anybody beat 13? Anybody have a higher? Yes? Might have been 14. Can we verify that? I'll take it, though. I like that one as well. We can do 13 and 14. Yesterday at our program, we had an 18. They remembered 18. You know what happened to that? They refinanced it really quick. So you remember way back when? You also remember that money markets were significantly up. We're going to show a slide in a bit here that shows you the real yield. Because you may have felt good, but we had a gentleman, Craig and myself, my former business partner, had a gentleman who came in, and he had been sold a whole bunch of 30-year Treasury bonds that yielded 16%. Think about that. Would you want a 30-year guaranteed investment that pays you 13%? Or 16%, I should say. Who here would like it? Good. Ken has those over here at the table on the... No, just kidding. We don't. But that was an incredible time. Now, if that occurs again, if we have something like that, we'll look toward our long-term strategy to do it. We'll adapt. But it's not there right now. You're seeing rates at incredibly nominal low lines. But inflation right now is seen when you're grocery shopping. It's seen when you have the coronavirus. You know what the coronavirus is, right? When you own a car and you go to the gas station and you feel sick when you get there and see the price. So that's the coronavirus. So as we go through and we take a look at these as well, it's a new variant of the coronavirus. I was going to go through that all. But at any rate, you're starting to see this inflation. Who here is concerned with inflation to themselves? We've talked about this. Jeremy Siegel talked about it. We gave $7 trillion out to people during COVID. You know what that does when $7 trillion is in people's hands and goes to the bank? They spend it. It causes inflation. We talked about 20% inflation. Jeremy Siegel did on some of our broadcasts, which I know all of you are on, because the 25 of you that show up every time means all of you are there. But It's theirs. Jeremy Siegel talked about this. 20% inflation per year over 4 years. It's about 5% per year. He's a little bit off. It's a little more this year. But they think that'll be the pig in the python. Then we'll head back towards normal inflation. What's the biggest deflationary item we have? It's the technology of a microchip that has gone up 1 million times in computing since 1958 and dropped 1 million times in price. It's a deflationary item that we don't measure. Okay, so that's a big portion that's made our lives most affordable since they've been since 1948. When you look at that. So anyway, a whole bunch of statistics we look at, but I just wanted to show you inflation on this slide.
A few of those items specifically, I think it was Chris or somebody that said you don't necessarily know how to define inflation, but you know what it is when you feel it, right?
Yeah.
And we've really felt that, especially in food, used cars, gas, and home prices. Used cars at one point were up 42% from where they were with 1 year prior. That was earlier this year in February. So that's been the most dramatic one since March of 2021 that we've seen. Restaurants as well. And if we're looking at the bar over on the side here on March 21st, dramatic increases across the board for both energy, vehicles, food, restaurants, and shelter as well. We've heard others that Chris mentioned earlier was wood, but that's really the amazing advantage of having those COIs, the centers of influence, coming and sharing things that they're seeing in their industry. Because the replacement costs on a home would be normally outside of the scope of our conversation, but it can be brought in to potentially help you guys. And we've seen a few others like that as well. One of our business owner clients said shingles were up 7% in February. They're up 20% last month. And they're booked out till August. So we're seeing it across a bunch of other industries right now as well.
But taking a look at interest rates, today the Fed's going to talk, but in strategies what we have is we have a couple things that fight this. We do have some strategic fixed income. But if you look at somebody who has investments that are 50-50 stock and bond, they're wondering why this year are they down 10%? And not just this month. Now they're down like 12 or 15. Why? Because their bonds are down as interest rates go up. That's not happened since way off this chart. Here, I can go back. Since way back here. We've had a phenomenal time as bonds have come down in yield. So a couple things you're looking at now is as the Fed starts to hike rates off the floor, we've been very accommodative. Basically, money's been free for almost 12 or 14 years. That usually creates a lot of demand. We've been very fortunate if you are a borrower. If you are a saver, you're not very happy with it, right? So looking at this environment, that's what we've been in. And the rates will probably come back to some nominal rate, which they expect to be between 2 to 4%. That's historically where they want to be.
And we talk about interest rates, when you talk about like who's being affected by that, it's probably not you guys. A lot of you have your mortgages paid off already, but it might be your kids, it might be your grandkids going through this right now. Used to be at 3%, right? About what a month ago or so, 3%. Now what is it at? Anybody know what a 30-year mortgage is? 5?
Yeah.
A little over 5 right now, right? That's the average. So what does that mean? When you look at a $400,000 home at 3% for a 30-year mortgage versus a 5%, it's about a $500 per month difference of cost. Now the question is, the job market's pretty hot right now, right? So can the consumer absorb that? And right now the answer is yes, because people are still buying homes. There's also a shortage of supply. Peter's going through this right now. A lot of people are going through this right now. There's a shortage of actual supply of homes right now. Even with all the building going on, even with the existing homes being sold, there's still a shortage. So are the prices too high? It's hard to tell, but there is a shortage of homes right now. Also, what we're seeing here is if you take a look at real rates right now, here we're talking about inflation. The real rate of like a CD or something at the bank is actually like negative 4 or 5% right now, just because of where inflation is. Now, what do you do with that? What are some of the alternatives that we can be looking at? So like Zach said, keep your CDs, if the one's coming due, keep it shorter because the Fed is raising rates. In theory, that should raise our savings rates up at the bank a little bit. Mortgage rates went up, right? But we've yet to see the savings follow. There's also a new investment. It's a little self-serving. It's a little pretentious. It's called I-bonds. They actually are paying.
Ken, aren't they? Maybe they're me bonds.
They're me bonds. They're I-bonds, right? So those are inflationary bonds that you can buy directly from the federal government. They've just been repriced. I think it's 9.62%. I saw the rate today. So those are called inflationary bonds. You only can buy so much per year from the Federal Reserve or federal government, which is $10,000 per person. Mike actually knows quite a bit about the rules on how long you have to hold them if it's something of interest to you. But it is a cash alternative that's out there, and it's called I-bonds. Global supply chain pressures. I think we all know that, right? There's a supply issue right now. Demand is there, supply is not, and that's why we have inflation right now. Plus, with all the money that's out there, we all know about the supply issue that was in LA off the coast, right? With that, but there's also deeper issues that don't get talked about a lot. When you take a look at like chips that are in vehicles, the microchips, 75% of the neon gas that goes into those chips is produced in Ukraine and Russia. So that's another issue. If we think we have a chip shortage right now with gas engines, wait till we have the electric vehicles on the road like it's being talked about right now. It's going to be even more of an issue. Palladium, catalytic converters. Why are those things being stolen all the time? Because they're very expensive right now. Where does that stuff come from? Russia and Ukraine. There's a supply chain issue right there. Taiwan has rolling 2-week shutdown still because of COVID. Causes a supply chain issue. Zach actually has some data that he read recently that might give us a little hope on that supply chain opening up a little more to get more product here faster.
Yeah, one of those things you may have seen on the news was recently in Shanghai. They had to shut down their different factories for a while. That's been happening in a lot of different places as China too. And they took 20 million COVID samples, test samples, 50 new cases out of 20 million. So the entire state of New York, population-wise, taking a COVID test and only 50 came back positive. So on a brighter note, we could be potentially seeing some improvement on the amount of shutdowns, the length of shutdowns, and maybe just shutdowns in general. But that was a very surprising one to see 20 million tests only come back 50 positive.
So the nice thing is one of the people that I met at Abundance 360 named Joy Tan, she was the head of Huawei, the single biggest electronics producer in the world in Shenzhen, China. Shenzhen, if you know, about 4 weeks ago, if you paid attention, they shut down for 2 weeks. Why? Because of COVID, what they had done in China, right? They were having all sorts of rolling shutdowns. But what she had said, and I said, what is this about, the supply chain issues? And we've been having conversations every month. But if you look at this, and she said, hey, Chris, just-in-time delivery has radically changed the world. Yes, it has. No longer do we have warehouses full of stuff that goes bad that we can't use anymore. When you need it, it's delivered. I need it now, it shows up. The trouble with it is we haven't experienced what we just did. When people hoard in just-in-time delivery, like they do toilet paper and pasta, apparently, there's not enough to go around for cars and other things. If we take our delivery plus 10 more deliveries, they don't have the capacity to make more that quickly. It takes about 2 years or more to get a new microchip supply or plant started, if you will. So they'll build it, they'll probably overbuild, and we'll be back to our static, consistent demand, right? But just-in-time delivery, when it's disrupted, can be very disrupted. And as economics go, Economics 101, when there's a big supply of something, prices typically go down, right? When there's a small supply of something, prices go up. I knew this as a kid. I bought a Joe Montana rookie football card for a penny. I sold it for $700, I thought. It was really $350, and I was disappointed to find that you don't get to sell it for what the price is. It's what demand is. Anyway. But do you look at that? Why? Because there were very few in demand when I bought it. But at the end of his career, he's a Hall of Fame. It's the same thing you're finding with cars and other stuff now in a different format. So this is a great one. So you've heard about the emergence of middle class for the emerging markets, if you will. If you go back, remember we've always talked about there's a big wave coming. And emerging markets, when they no longer want to eat rice, corn, and beans, the first thing they want to do is eat meat once they become prosperous enough to do so. They have. The next stage beyond it is consumerism. What is consumerism? Ken mentioned it here. The fact that we build and buy so much stuff we can't fit it in our house, so we've got to put storage in. But the first step of that is typically what? Anybody have an example? How about shoes? Nike shoes, Western goods, Fendi purses. They want to start to show their wealth a little bit. We have 1 billion people, which is approximately 3 times the size of the U.S. in consumers alone growing over the next 10 years. Some have said as high as 1.6 billion. The whole point is there's a massive market out there for people to look to consume goods of great companies around the world for the first time. So with that, that doesn't guarantee great returns, but it guarantees there is a market there. There are people who now have money who haven't, and they're able to participate in our economy. So it's kind of interesting. Oops. Cash returns. Who here is excited about cash? Yeah, nobody is. So, all right, next slide. Just kidding. As you look at cash right now, and we've seen this, there's no magic to cash. We get more calls on cash. I mean, we get calls all the, hey, I've got this cash that I say, what should I do? Well, if you're not going to invest it, do you have like a magic bond that I can put it in at 5%? The answer is no. No. There's some companies that have some money markets that are maybe 50 basis points or 0.5%, if that excites you. But what I say is, as Ken mentioned it too, be very careful with locking anything in long term right now. Buying guaranteed annuities at this level. 3 to 4 years from now, you'll find historically or most likely a much higher rate that you can buy these at. They're fixed for a very long time. You want to be careful about doing something now. But if you have a lump sum pension, you might want to consider that now, or your friends who are considering it, because you're going to see some massive shifts in the value of what those will be if they take a lump sum. So interest rates are very interesting, but cash right now, we've got more cash on the sidelines than we've ever seen. We have private equity with more cash to deploy than they've ever seen. There's just massive amounts of money, and it's getting almost nothing, right? After inflation, it's negative. What do people want to do with that? They eventually want to put it to work once they're over their fear of what's happening today. So the ingredients are all there for a great market. So this is market corrections. I just am going to read this quick. You've seen it. Market corrections are swift and visceral. They come without warning. Their length stays unknown. They're not pleasant when they're around. They leave scars on those who react poorly. They're temporary and necessary. They are vital to the long term. They are also essential to the health of long-term bull markets. Just like yesterday was essential to the grass out there being green, corrections are essential to the next leg up. It's basically people who shouldn't have had stocks handing them back to you, the rightful owners, so you can experience the next upturn. That's what it's about. So I like to simplify it just because it's simpler.
Yeah, this next piece here is the annual end of the world, and you've seen this chart many times. You've seen it in all your reviews. You probably could give it better than I could right now. But what's interesting right now, Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett, his conference just got done this last week, and I read some of the excerpts from it. And basically, what's going on right now is there's a massive amount of speculation on high quality companies right now. Basically, high quality companies are being traded like poker chips right now. And that's causing some of the market to go down right now. There's also some fear about a recession, also a fear about inflation that's happening right now. But what this chart is showing, which is very difficult to see in the back, but really what it talks about is where the markets end up for the year at the end of the year versus what happens throughout the year, okay? And in 2020 is a great example of when COVID happened, that the markets dropped 34% in 33 days. We all felt that one. That was a fast downturn. But actually, the markets ended up 16% for that year. So on paper, it looked like nothing happened, right? We actually made money during one of the worst pandemics we've seen in a long time. But yet we know the whole world has changed. That's really what this is trying to say. So with the markets being down, like Chris mentioned, maybe somewhere between 13 and 15% as we talk right now, if you have some of those CDs that are coming due, think about this. If we're earning maybe 1% in some of these CDs that we have, isn't now a good time to maybe put some money to work? Now, I'm not saying you need to have cash. Well, we want to be very clear in our message that you need to have the emergency fund. But if you feel like it's growing to a point where you're comfortable with it, think about this. If the market's rebounded back up just to be flat, you'd make about 15 years of interest in what, 6 months? I said 4 months, right? Mm-hmm. So you make 15%, 15 years worth of interest. Just a thought for new money coming in. When's the best time to invest new money? Right now. Always right now. Right? So that's really what this is showing. So,
And we'll reiterate that a little bit later as well. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And with the sticking to it chart, this is one of my favorites that we added in here. How many of you have been invested for more than 15 years through your overall strategies? Absolutely. We often get questions on the short term. What are the percentages of positive returns versus negative returns on a 1 day, all the way on the far left, to 15 years on the right? So I believe it was Don Connolly that one time said, what is the difference between gambling and investing? Gambling, the more you play, the higher percentage chance you have to lose. Investing, the longer you invest, the longer you're in the game, the higher you have chance you have to win. It's exactly what this is showing. On a 1 day, it's a 54% chance for the markets to be positive. All the way up to about a middle is 1 year. Amazingly, 1 year, rolling year periods since 1969, 81% of the time the markets have been positive. We go, and why we always stress a long-term perspective, we go all the way on the far right to 15 years. 100% of the time, rolling year periods since 1969, the market has been positive. If we go back even 10 years, 95% of the time, and you guys actually lived through one of those 10-year periods, 2000 to 2010. Direction and corrections, this didn't come up yesterday either, but at least this time I was prepared to talk about it instead. But a question we often get, like Ken mentioned, is what to do with that outside cash. When the S&P 500 temporarily goes down 10%, it's perfect, Chris.
Go ahead, I'll keep going.
When the S&P 500 temporarily goes down 10%, the following 12-month return, if you were to do nothing, is positive 10% as well. If you are to get money to work when the S&P temporarily corrects 10%, it's 15. So we don't know when that will occur. Could be 4 months, as Ken said, a year, 2 years. But over history since 1950, the next 12 months has produced a significantly positive return. Awesome. This is one of our favorites, and Ken mentioned when is the best time to invest is now. So if we're starting on the left, we're looking at a 10-year period ending in 2001. The middle, we're looking at a 10-year period ending in 2011. On the far right, we're looking at a 10-year period ending in 2021. And it gives us 5 different scenarios during those time frames. If you were to invest $12,000 continually during that year, perfect timing, which would be great if we could figure out when that would be every time. The first of the year, just as soon as you can for that year. Dollar cost averaging along the way on a monthly basis. The worst timing, or just holding our money in cash. So if we're just looking at the colors, the common theme along the way is perfect timing would be ideal. But amazingly, just by getting money to work more time in the market, just first of the year, was the second best performer every single year except the 10-year period from 2001 to 2011, but is only within $1,000 during that point to dollar cost averaging. So the answer to that one is, when is the best time to get our money to work? When we have it, when it's available.
What make it simple is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Why do people look? Every scenario, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 3, 2, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But it's very close on this one. It could be very close to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anyway, kind of an interesting one. So financial planning, what I want to do is I'm about to reveal to you something that I'm going to call them over 25 years I've been able to discern. I'm going to call them the unwritten rules of retirement. A lot of them have come from you, so you get credit for this, but I want to unveil them right now.
All right, financial planning, I love this section. It's very factual. It really jives with who I am. Secure Act, okay? Secure Act, something that came out at the end of 2019. That is where the RMDs changed from 70.5 to 72. RMDs stand for Required Minimum Distributions, the amount that we have to take out of our accounts each and every year. That changed, right? Now there's something called Secure Act 2.0 that just passed the House almost unanimously. Okay, and what that is more extra savings basically to IRAs. And they're talking about changing the RMD age to age 75. We just changed it to 72. Now they're talking about changing it to 75. Delaying the time that you have to take money out of your IRA. Why are they doing that? Pensions are going away. Some of you have pensions in the room. They're very valuable. They're very nice. They provide a very nice level of monthly income. That has gone away. It's on the employee to save more and more and more, and that's what some of these rules are talking about right now. So one of the big things, some of you have inherited IRAs. You know, I'm not saying a lot of you, but some of you do. This is very important. They just changed the rule on this. Is there used to be a 10-year payout on that, right? So if you inherited an IRA from a non-spouse, you have a 10-year payout after 2020. Okay, so if you inherited an IRA after 2020, you have 10 years. They just came out with a new rule saying that it all depends on how old the person was that passed away that you inherited it from. They kind of threw a curveball here. So most of the time, the person is above that 70.5, 72 range most of the time, right? So now that means that instead of waiting the whole 10 years to take it out at the end, we have to take annual distributions for those 10 years if we want to. So we have to take the annual at least. We can take more, but it has to be the annual. So if you have an inherited IRA, during our review meeting, we're going to go through this to make sure that if you have to take out your RMD for that year on that inherited IRA, we certainly get that out because we don't want the IRS knocking on our door. It's a 50% penalty for whatever we don't take out. So that's not good. Roth conversions, this is very individual, but now we're getting to a sweet spot in the market where Roth conversions are very valuable. What does that mean? Taking money out of your traditional IRA and converting it, paying taxes on that, and converting it to your Roth IRA. Pretty valuable right now. Why? Because the spring is compressed right now. So when we get into the Roth IRA, when things bounce back up, the earnings that you get are now in your Roth IRA, not to be taxed again as the rules are today. Very valuable. We'll be talking to you about Roth conversions if that's your scenario. Charitable giving. This is a big one. What we're noticing is that some of you take the itemized deduction. It's pretty high, right? But some of you are itemizing. So this idea of giving money from your IRA to a church or a charity, very much a viable idea. It's called a QCD, Qualified Charitable Distribution, right? Very viable. But if you're itemizing, sometimes cash, sometimes highly appreciated securities are even better because we get more of a credit for our deduction on our taxes. So again, we'll work with you, we'll work with your accountant, but it's something we're going to notice. We're going to ask you, do you itemize or do you take the standard deduction? It has a big part of what the strategy is for your giving, and a lot of you do give, which is fantastic. I'm going to let Zach talk about rebalancing.
If you guys have ever been on our bi-weekly webinars that we have, I absolutely love rebalancing. And I continue to talk about it every time. But the idea of rebalancing is just simply taking off what has done well, buying more what didn't do as well to get to our original strategy. So the last few years, we would have been selling off of our large cap growth, our technology type companies, small cap growth. That's what was hit the hardest this year. So by disciplined approach of rebalancing every single year, we reduce risk to help potentially maximize return. This year, a bright spot that we've seen in your strategy is potentially if you own alternatives, the alternative fund is up 26%. So the market is temporarily down 15%. That one fund is up 26%. The beauty of that, if that falls during a rebalance time frame, you're trimming off of that alternative fund, buying more of what temporarily isn't doing well. Right now it's the large cap technology, small cap technology as well, potentially setting the stage for future growth. Over time, we've found that that can benefit from anywhere from 0.1 to over 1%, depending on the time frame you look at, just by the disciplined approach of doing it every single year.
Awesome. Thank you, Zach. That's true.
Yeah, number 5, income planning. This is a big one. We talked about interest rates. We talked about bonds. A lot of you have strategies where we have bonds that are allocated for that. Think of your money in 2 buckets. There's more buckets than that, but think of it as 2. We have our stocks over here, and we have our bonds over here. The bonds are for your income that you're taking out. We have right around 6 to 7 to 8 years worth of income typically for you in the bond section. So that's why we use some of the bonds that we do that aren't the traditional bonds that you hear about. But that bucket is there for income. So if the markets are down temporarily, we're going to take a look at rebalancing. We're going to take a look at this side over here and let this take its time to rebound back up. That way we're never selling low your investments in your portfolio. That's a key one. Number 6, it's not written. So does that make it unwritten? Another unwritten rule? Yes? Okay, maybe. All right. This one is about financing some of your projects, financing some of your purchases. Taking chunks of money out of your strategies can be a good idea in some cases, but also take a look at some financing as well. We just had a client secure an RV for under 3% for 5 years. That's pretty good. That's a pretty good rate. So that way we can slowly pay that off rather than taking a big chunk out of the investments in that case.
So number 7, which is unwritten, we've been looking at a lot, and these come from you. But many of you have been very fortunate to have saved more than you'll need to use for the rest of your life because of your frugal living, but also because of your rampant savings. So we've been looking at something called family wealth distribution planning. It may be a new word to you, but this is more advanced. Family wealth distribution planning says in your family, you probably have a great place to pay taxes for some of that money that taxes are owed on. Now, money that is in taxable accounts often steps up at death, so sometimes that will happen in your portfolio, in your strategies, I should say. But what's interesting about this is we found some people who have some children who are neurosurgeons and also children who are missionaries. So we might want to give different assets to different people. We also may want to pay the tax ourselves versus putting it on them, since they're forced to take it out over 10 years now. So this family wealth distribution planning is unique as each one of you in here. But I want to let you know this is a big new item that has come up with a lot of the tax law. And we're going to spend 2 or 3 days talking more about tax law next week. But this is something we're really keen on right now for any of you who have accumulated more than you'll need. And that's many of you. So I wanted to bring that up as number 7 on here as well. Thanks, Ken.
And then one thing we wanted to make sure to share with you, I want to make sure we have enough time for Chris and the amazing technologies come in, so I'll go through it very briefly. But we're always making sure that we're bringing as much value as possible to you guys. And there was a massive study done by Russell Investments this year on the value an advisor brings. When they went through their entire list of things that an advisor brings, we mentioned rebalancing, portfolios, different things like that, they found that the 2 biggest benefits to add up to a 4.79% annualized benefit to clients is actually behavior and taxes. Over 70% of the value is brought through behavior and taxes. And when I first joined Gentian, I was like, didn't we just talk about corrections last event? Didn't we just talk about it again? I thought we were doing investments. Why are we talking about taxes? Well, actually, it's the biggest benefit we can add. And since we've been tracking this, behavior has actually continued to increase as far as the benefit added. Mm-hmm. That recency bias that we mentioned earlier, it's getting tougher and tougher to make wise decisions with our money. So that's why we're always trying to bring as much perspective as we possibly can to each of you.
Awesome. Thank you, Zach. That's true. So again, we try to look at inflation, market in Ukraine, obviously some of the things happening there, war puts a lot of fear. Remember, there's good fear and there's bad fear. Good fear is fear of the Lord and doing things that are good, right? But there's also bad fear, which is just bringing future problems into today. That's the one thing about worry and fear is as well. So we look at this as there's a lot of that occurring today. You'll see a lot of people extremely bearish, about as negative as I've ever seen them. Yet, if you look at their balance sheets, remember, the last 3 years have been fantastic in investments, right? So when that happens, there's bound to be some sort of a reduction in that. And we're in that period of time now. You're not surprised. We've talked about it forever. But I'll tell you what, those outside of these walls are surprised. It's a huge advantage. Their behavior changes. Yours doesn't. You stick with the plan, which is outstanding. Also then, how much longer will the correction last? Ken told us. What should I do with my cash reserves? Why do my bonds have a negative return? Where are my capital gains so high? And can I afford to retire? We didn't talk as much about that. That's individual. But that's what it is we do. Gentian retirement is plan it, live it, and give it. Now, any questions that you guys have for us before? What I'd like to do is we're going to take a 5-minute break. But I think what I'm about to talk to you about is going to Abundance 360 for my 9th year. I've realized something here that I want to help you. Some of the technology, some of the ideas in here are literally going to change the future of your family's lives. This is going to be a bit more of an open discussion. I'm going to sit down. I'll talk about these. I'm going to introduce some things you should be aware of, even just in the concept. I'm not going to dive deep into them, but I'm going to give you, here's the concepts you're going to want to know and keep track of, because there are all sorts of things out there that are pie in the sky and there's a hope. But we want to take a look at what these are. So what I may do, if there's any questions first. So what is the minimum, maximum, standard deviation, average length of a correction? It's a good question. And I'm going to give you an about. It's about 14 months. And it's typically, I think, around 25.9, corrections, it's 14.1% on an annual basis. The average, let's go backward. No, the average is 9 months for the 14%. But an average bear market goes about 15 months. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's like 9 to 15 months.
Typically, yeah, for averages. They expand as much as 6 years, which is a Great Depression. So here's data I've got. As a matter of fact, we've got tons of these for you if you'd like. The data is vast and wide, but the last bear market was how many months? 33 days. 2020, March. 33 days went down 34%. Recovered inside of 6 months. So that reduces the averages pretty quickly there. Yeah, it's a great question, though, Rich. I know we can talk more about in depth about that. No, it's a fair. Another time, but that's a great question. Great question. There was another hand to go up. It's a good question. So remember, what does demand do for interest rates? Demand on prices normally goes what? Demand for prices is something. If we got a lot of demand, it drives the price up, right? So what does it do for bonds when there's a lot of demand? Rates stay low, right? What the Fed is smart about is the U.S. government has refinanced most of its long-term debt to about 1.95% on average, and it's all pushed out in the 20 and 30-year range. It was around 4%. So during this time, they've actually refinanced. But with them reducing their purchasing of bonds, rates will come up. This is theoretical, but most likely rates will come up because of a lack of demand. They've been creating demand by buying it themselves. Here's even a better question. If you loan money to yourself and you default on it, what happens? People ask that question because the government's done it. Wow. Do you declare yourself bankrupt? Is there any? So again, this is a whole other issue. It's a great question, though. It's going to increase interest rates on a quicker basis, if you will. And remember, interest rates going up is an issue to fixed income until you start to purchase new fixed income. That's why having some floating rate environments is very important in what you own, because once that happens, strategies can change to where you'll then, once rates are 5 or 6%, go to a normal fixed income portfolio again. That adaptability is very important when it comes to fixed income, but a lot of people are not talking about that. That's a great point. And the other thing people aren't talking about is a balance sheet. We put $7 trillion out there, added to a massive national debt. From some of the data, though, if you've ever looked at the balance sheet of the U.S., including all parks and all the buildings it owns, I think we went from something like, and this is just an estimate, 7% to 11% of our balance sheet. So if you've ever looked at that, it's still pretty good on a balance sheet basis. Now, inflation will inflate 20% of that debt away. That's another strategy for it as well. So the key is we've got another 20 to 30 years before we can pay it all off before our grandchildren have to pay for it. Abundance 360, about 10 years ago when it started, was 50 people in a room, a bunch of geek scientists who just talked about ideas and technology. And they thought, this would be great if we had a group of people from around the world of different vocations, if you will, who talked about the ramifications of technology. So for the past 9 years, I ended up being one of the ones I was introduced through Strategic Coach. And to have the different varied conversations we have around not just technology being introduced to it, but what is the future with technology. And I got to tell you, quite honestly, some of the things that are changing are game-changing now. I'm going to talk about this. People might wonder, why would my financial advisor go to a program on technology? And I'll tell you, when I first got there, it was interest of investments. Now I get there, and it's interest of a screen to figure out what you should be paying attention to and what you shouldn't. Now, there's good and bad happening from technology. It is now beginning to grow at a rate that's almost unfathomable. So what I do is I want to give you guys real-world life decisions that you and your family can be introduced to, that you can make while this is going on and before it happens, versus it blindsiding you. Because the pace of change is doubling wildly quickly. So let me just give you a sample on that. So this book from Stephen M.R. Covey. Does everybody know Stephen Covey, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Yep. So his son, Stephen M.R. Covey, has written 2 books, now 3, called The Speed of Trust, what's the other one? Speed of Trust and Smart Trust, thank you. And then also Trust and Inspire. What's interesting about that, and this came up in the beginning of the book, back in, say, 1700, or every 100 years since the beginning of time, about all knowledge in the world doubled. That was the speed. About every knowledge in the world doubled about every 100 years. Since the advent of the microchip in 1958, by about 1984, all information in the world doubled every 18 months. And that's pretty amazing. Measured today, all information in the world doubles every 12 hours. Now think about that. Why are people feeling overwhelmed? Why are they feeling that their mind can't adapt to this? Well, because it literally can't. So presently, do you remember when your parents, or you maybe have heard the stories, your parents or grandparents, when they had to make a decision about like getting milk, it was utterly simple, right? Got farmers over here, you get it. But today, an internet decision you might have to make may have 1 million choices. How do we as humans operate with 1 million choices? Statistically, not well. Okay, it's called overwhelm. So what I've done here in looking at some of this is literally the very first day that I go, it's 3 full days. We're talking with people, they'll bring in Tony Robbins, Steve Jobs, and a lot of people who are starting technologies. It's phenomenal. But the conversations then delve into, but what is that going to do for people? And that's where people like myself come in. So what's interesting this time, I'm going to give you some of these different concepts, but with this massive increase in technology and technological speed, here's what I want to tell you. It's not slowing down. If everything in the world that you see right now is crazy, wait till all the technology and the speed doubles in 12 hours. And you think about it. Why is it? Because machine learning is occurring. About 5 or 7 years ago, we were having a conversation there with Ray Kurzweil. Ray Kurzweil is one of the most foremost futurists. He's great. He doesn't like people touching him, so I got a picture with my arm around him. He's kind of like, pretty funny. But as we were talking with him, we're talking about, what are the predictions about the future? Well, artificial intelligence will do this, this, and this. But my point, and I brought up in front of the whole group, is so you're creating something that thinks for itself. How can you predict how fast that will create its own knowledge? Oh, well, we've got this all mapped out. Well, apparently I'm going to say this year. They don't. Because it's faster than they thought by a very, very high degree. What's coming in is something called quantum computing. And quantum computing, what they believe, borrows energy from a parallel universe to do computing in ours. So it is the stuff of science fiction. Rigetti Systems, I met Chad 9 years ago. We're trying to figure out, what is this quantum computing? Quantum computing is taking something almost to absolute zero, it's 270 degrees Kelvin, just massively low, and then operating computer tricks and calculations on something called qubits. Anyway, I won't get into the geeky stuff like that as much, but I'm going to give you some ideas here about some things you're going to want to pay attention to, and then we'll have a discussion about how this might affect us. What is this going to do for our families? What decisions should we introduce our families to? Because there's some radical potential changes here, and some have already happened. So Abundance 360 is what we've talked about. Now, you guys know the internet, right? Everybody heard the internet? I like to call it the internet because my children think it's, Dad, it's the internet. You guys, the Facebook, whatever. But you guys remember essentially as you run through here, AOL, Microsoft, or was it MSN, remember Java? Anybody have Yahoo, Netflix? So these were incredible things for Web 1.0. Basically what you did, you go out there, it's read-only, it's decentralized. You go out there, you read some stuff, and you go, hey, it must be true, it was on the internet, right? So that's Web 1.0. It's consumer-based, right? They put some information out and you read it. Web 2.0 is participatory-based. So Web 2.0 has been where it's morphed to. That's Facebook, that's Twitter, that's AWS, that's Amazon, that's Google, that's looking here at Snapchat. So this is now the internet where you're looking at not only just going there for information, but you're able to communicate through that. You're able to do Zoom with somebody. You're able to buy something, right? So what's interesting about this is participatory and it's centralized. Now what I want to introduce to you now is something that's coming up called Web 3.0. Okay? Anybody heard of Web 3.0? I brought it up before, so if you hadn't, you just don't remember. But last year, they introduced the concept, and it's like, yeah. Kind of like when they introduced cryptocurrency to me 8 years ago, and we're like, yeah. They gave us $100 worth in these little tokens. We're like, whatever. Nobody kept the code that you had to keep with it. So that would be worth something like $20,000 today. So of the 250 participants, I think 3 kept it. Basically, that means there's less cryptocurrency in the world for everyone. So, but don't give that to people unless it was worth about, I think it was maybe $10 actually. Web 3.0 is things like Bitcoin, Steemit. You're going to see different things here, but they're interactive. And the key with this is now there's no intermediary and it's decentralized. What does that mean there's no intermediary? There's nobody controlling it. They're creating organizations and sometimes in cryptocurrencies around ideas and social ideas. Let's say we really believe that cats are God. There's a group that just believes that. There's a group over here that believes cats are good for dinner, right? No disrespect, I love cats. But you've got 2 completely different ideas, right? And the key with decentralized is they're creating communities of other people who believe that, like flat earthers and others. Now, they'll actually create a coin around it. They'll create ideas around this as well. So this new Web 3.0 is really a basis for what's about to happen. Here's the case. If Web 1.0 made a lot of people super rich, Web 2.0, Apple, Amazon, everybody who operates on it, made people super duper rich, they say this will dwarf that. They say this will dwarf that. And it's happening now. Okay, so this is the kind of companies you'll invest around. But here's what's interesting. That's like saying, you know what, if you took all the values of all the horses back in 1900 before we had cars, the value of cars today dwarf that. Well, of course they do. Things grow, money grows, right? But when you look at this, this is the new piece. So what I want to do in here as well, one of the things that comes from this is cryptocurrency. So what's interesting about cryptocurrency is you guys all know it. You hear about it. You talk about it. Anybody here own crypto? You don't have to put your hands up. Some people own cryptocurrency. Some people's kids work in cryptocurrency. What is cryptocurrency? So it's something that's based on this Web 3.0. Have you heard of blockchain? Blockchain is a public ledger. Right now, there's something called a dark web, and that's in Web 2.0. That's really things you don't want to hear about, and they're untraceable. They'll steal your information. They'll sell it. I mean, there's a whole undercurrent. Now, because remember, all the good technology can do also has all the bad technology can do, right? So super smart people are on both sides. So cryptocurrency is interesting. It's Bitcoin. I think there's 1 million cryptocurrencies that are out there. You can issue a coin yourself. You can call it, Chris coin, whatever you want to call it, Gentian coin. You can issue this. And then you just hope it goes up in value. But here's the key. What's behind cryptocurrency? It's a blockchain event that is recorded in ownership. So here's for instance. Let me give you one sample of this. People thought it was non-traceable and people were laundering money because people didn't know how to track it. It's interesting, but let me actually do one step back first. What is cryptocurrency? It is a mathematical equation around energy on the internet in a place. The mathematical equation is almost unsolvable except by very smart people. So you have to trust that very smart people have your best interest at heart, right? But this is what cryptocurrency is. Now, what do they value cryptocurrency in? US dollars. So you look at this as, you and I agree that this Bitcoin, this coin that doesn't exist, it's a digital imprint, has a value today of around $36,000. At one point it was $1 or $10, I say. At one point it was 70,000, right? But that's just like saying that the Swiss franc, does the Swiss franc really have anything behind it if you hold Swiss francs in you? Or is it just the fact that you agree to use this as some exchange? That's what cryptocurrency is. It's currency. Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, I don't know if you just saw it, came out and said, it's crap. It doesn't produce anything. It's all a joke. It's all human speculation. Then we have Kathy Wood on the other side from ARK Fund saying that she thinks by 2030 it could be worth $4 million a coin from today $36,000. So I've seen smart people say dumb things before. So I don't take any super smart person's opinion going, oh, that's going to happen. No, we're going to ride that train. But you got to look at it and say, yeah, it could be. But what could drive that? We're not sure. So cryptocurrency is a basis for you and I decentralized. We don't go to a government to exchange currency. So I can create this in corrupt environments like Argentina, let's say, or in South Africa, or in some of the countries in Africa. You and I can now bypass the government where most of the money gets taken and go directly between each other and exchange something of value. That changes economics, okay? So that's one of the bases. The next one is going to be called DeFi. This is a concept. So anybody here ever get a loan not at a bank? Decentralized finance is this concept. I want you to make sure you pay attention. DeFi. You bought your home from a bank. Well, how about instead of a bank and intermediary and all the salaries they pay, we just put together something here that says, all right, we're going to finance Ken's house. Done. Blockchain can do it. I'm going to talk about in just a couple things that allow that to happen. And all of a sudden now you are charging a 4% interest rate instead of a bank. Decentralized finance is a way to finance things without going through the traditional form that we have, and it's going to be based on blockchain and coins. One thing I want to go back to on this is when it comes to cryptocurrency, most of them do not have a business proposition. One does, and that is Ethereum. Anybody heard of NFTs, non-fungible tokens? Yeah. So they're basically digital art and different things like that. What's interesting about this is when you look at Ethereum, Ethereum has a smart contract that can be built into it, and a smart contract is this. Let's say I create a piece of art that becomes the Mona Lisa. When I first sell it, I may sell it for $1,000 or $100 or whatever it is, right? Then it becomes in the Louvre and it's priceless, $200 million. But it's sold 4 or 5 times along the way. How much do I get after I sold it? Nothing, right? Ethereum has a smart contract built into it that says, for every sale forever on this non-fungible token, that's this digital art, the founder gets 10% of the sale or whatever you want to put into it. So now if it's sold for $200 million, I get 10% of that. It's pretty cool, eh? I get $20 million. I first sold it for $1,000, but every transaction after that, I'm still paid. That changes the way you look at art. That changes the way you look at potentially at music. That changes the way you look at a lot of relationships, right? But you have to agree upon a cryptocurrency in order to do it with these non-fungible tokens, right? So again, I won't get too deep into this. There's some ideas, but it's where these things start to put together that they become really interesting. So the future of cash, the future of money, could change. The government's trying to get into this. Other people are accepting it. Maybe there's a U.S. dollar coin that is electronic currency, so we don't have to pass these, paper bills around. They become dirty and they pass disease, right? So it'll be an interesting one. So decentralized finance is another concept. The blockchain is the basis of what I wanted to talk about. So this is Boeing at some point during their airplanes, they have 1 million parts. They have no idea where 99% of them are. No idea. What blockchain is, it's a public ledger that allows you to track anything ad nauseum forever. Here's a sample. Let's say that you and I, and this is how it can change the world. Let's say that you and I own a house, a lake property. I want to get rid of it. You just show up and go, you know what? I like this lake property. This is exactly what I'm looking for. I want to buy it. What if you could say, well, how much is it? I say $400,000. You check on your blockchain. It says, yep, you own it. Well, you just transfer $400,000 worth of Bitcoin to me. You own it. That took about 3 minutes. Nobody else is involved. We're done. It's on the central blockchain. It's a ledger. You now own it. That's decentralized finance. That's decentralized sales. This is what blockchain can do. So there's going to be some industries that are massively changed, that are intermediaries today, that you won't need. Okay, so this is a big, big, big. This is what the Internet 3.0 is really based on. It's blockchain. And you can have different blockchains, right? It's not just one. You can have different blockchains, but people predominantly are going to probably want to use 1 or 2 or 3. But you're going to want to know that. So this is something that's come up from it. This new Web 3.0 has massive possibilities, but this is what a lot of people have talked about. And almost all of the experts who were there agreed upon. They talked like this will happen. There'll be so much money made that they're going to have a universal basic income. Have you heard of that before? Universal basic income. So here's an idea. So we have something here sort of like it called welfare and social help. So essentially as you go through welfare and a lot of our social systems here, back in 1948-ish and around there, they were created. And at the time, 14% of people were in poverty. So we wanted to cure that. So we created some social programs that we help give money to people in certain scenarios. Since that time in 1948 to today, they've measured, they've given about $278 trillion to social welfare, right? So that today, 14% of people are in poverty. Exactly. It's like, well, really? Well, so what have we done here? Maybe we need to do it differently, but that's a whole other subject. So what they're looking at is, what if we just took a universal based income? Everybody who's an American gets $30,000. You can decide to work or do something more than that if you'd like. They proposed that with the wealth created, the tax is going to be created as well. It would actually save us money over our current system. And everybody gets $30,000 as a base. So there's some radical ideas, but this is what the, quote, leaders of the future are looking at. Now, the question I have, if you think that unemployment is a problem now, what do you think when everybody gets $30,000 a year? Goodbye, McDonald's drive-through attendant, which is going away anyway. I'll talk about in just a minute, from automation. So this is foundational as well. This is what some of these things are doing. Another one is VTOLs, vertical takeoff and landing. I want to talk about this. So you guys all know of airports and where they are because you have a big runway, you got to go there. What if that airplane lands in your backyard? Picks you up there, takes you wherever you need to go. It's called vertical takeoff and landing. The airport is anywhere where there's a clear area. These are occurring now. This is changing flight as we know it. I sat next to a gentleman who had left Airbus. He'd been there for 10 years, their chief technical officer, and he was leaving because he wanted to create a VTOL company and make his real mark on the world. Vertical takeoff and landing is the future of flight. Okay? Now let me ask you a question. What happens when you take vertical takeoff and landing, drone, which is the next one, you combine these two together, which is a drone, and I can get to northern Wisconsin in 15 minutes. You can get to your local lake home in 15 minutes. You can sleep along the way too, because you're not driving. Might that change real estate? Might that change value? So again, it's not the fact that these exist or they're coming. It's the fact that what might they do to the way we live? I'm going to explore that more a little as we go along. There's some different ideas as I go through this as well, because there's so many notes. Honestly, I could stay here for 3 days and go through the notes that we talked about. But what's super important about these is we're beginning to do things that are quite astounding. Let me do 2 or 3 more here. This is kind of fun. This is one of the ideas. Drones, they're now dropping a lot of the products that you'll need off in your own lawn in certain areas. So essentially, you set up a little delivery area, you order it, Amazon drops it off there, you order it from Walgreens, 10 minutes later, it's dropped off in your backyard. You pick it up, how about this? You've got a chute on the top of your roof, it comes down the chute, it sits right exactly where you are. How about this? Your Samsung refrigerator saw that you were out of milk or it was expired, automatically ordered it from the store for you, shows up there for you, goes into your refrigerator, you have fresh milk, you didn't even know you needed it. You know what that does? Makes it super convenient, right? It also takes away human agency. You decide, I don't want that kind of milk. I want to go out to the store and run into people. I want to, right? So you got to look at the good and bad of this. This is amazing and astounding, and it is happening right now. This is what people are looking at, and they've got companies doing it presently. Here's a great one. Anybody heard of digital Einstein fakes? So this one here is outstanding. Digital Einstein is an idea that has come up. They have taken all the works of Einstein, all of his interviews, all of his conversations, and they've recorded them and put them into a neural network. A neural network is a brain-like learning computer chip, essentially, or algorithm. So you can actually ask Einstein questions and talk to him, even though he's not living today. Kind of cool, eh?
Hi there. I am Digital Einstein. I would love to meet you and share my knowledge. I can even with you on a variety of topics. All you need to do is click Let's Chat below to say hi. Speak soon.
So on that website, you can go on to Meet Einstein, and underneath you can say Let's Chat. You can ask questions to him. Here's where it's even more interesting. They've done this with Holocaust survivors. People are still alive from the Holocaust today, and this is at the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. They've taken every conversation, asked them all the same questions, hundreds of questions. You can actually have a conversation with somebody who was there, and it has a neural learning network to give you answers. It answers a question you ask. This would be interesting. Now, let me ask a question. So that's great, Chris, but what if I don't go there? Wouldn't it be cool if you recorded for the members of your family? Or if you could go back hundreds of years and ask, great-great-grandpa, when you came over on the boat, why did you leave everything you had? What was it that sent you here with just the hope of something? You didn't own anything. Well, how about if you left that for your great-great-great-grandchildren today? Hey, we're in a world of abundance. We just have the internet. These phones are here. This is that. How cool would that be for them to be able to ask you questions and get an answer and have a relationship with you, even if you're far gone because you didn't live to 185? These are the things that are changing. Here's the difference. You can now create digital fakes in a very interesting way. This is called soul machines. Soul machines are neural networks, which you then can it learns from your interactions to provide you service. For instance, the person who introduced every guest speaker over 3 days is right here. Her name was Sam. Sam is a neural network. She's fed information. She simply talks just like any one of us would. You barely see any difference. Matter of fact, if you don't like Sam, but you like Alina or you like Evan, or you can choose any of the facial characteristics you want. This person then can become your digital personal assistant. Hey, Chris, that food you just ordered doesn't really jive with the diet you're trying to, to keep up. You know what? Hey, Chris, remember, in 5 minutes, you got to make a phone call. Hey, you got this. Hey, we'll go out. You need to order this from Amazon. Should I go ahead and do it? You're going to order pizza. Do you want your favorite? So this person becomes almost your Jarvis, almost your personal assistant. Why is that interesting? Because my next teammate could be digital and serve you 24/7. You could each have your own personal digital Gentian team member. Of course, that would never replace the people in the back of the room, ever. So you know that. But they could enhance the service to say, your kids have questions, we don't have and they want to ask the question at 2 a.m., fine. Here's your digital Zach. Here's your digital Lisa. Here's the filters. So it's interesting. They also learn and become better. So with this, you can choose any accent, any language, anything that you like, and they speak like you. Here's what Peter Diamandis did. He recorded something, and you can't tell the difference between him and a fake of him that spoke 7 different languages. So he made a 30-second speech. Then he did it in Russian. He did it in, several different African languages. He did it in Spanish and others. And he said, Peter, do you know any of those languages? No. You cannot tell the difference that he was not from Pakistan, that he wasn't from wherever he was. So talk about deep fakes. Talk about the future of what it could be for news. So one interesting thing is fun. I put some of these up here. I'm going to go through a few more, but Soul Machines is a great website. You can go to it. You can play with some of these things and see it. The same thing with Meet Einstein. But I want to give you some of these because this is just where some of this is colliding. This is computer chips. This is Web 3.0. This is the future of interaction. Now, there's some more things that are way more astounding than this coming that I'll talk about. But I'm going to sit down and kind of go through some of those pieces as well. Again, there's so much that goes on with this. This is a portion where I kind of want to go through this and talk about some of the things that I've seen that are on here that are maybe even more, I don't want to call them catastrophic, but more interesting as we go through. For instance, the third day was all about longevity. Anybody here know debatably how the oldest person or how old the oldest person was in the world? 118 presently, right? But the record they say in China was 135. They think she may be using her mother's birth certificate, so take 23 years off. So people are living to 118, 120. But in biblical times, if you read it, they say this was very common. But so you're looking at this today. Dave Asprey, one of the gentlemen there, his goal is to live to be 185. So he's 26% old is how he calls himself. Calculate it backwards, right? Some of the different things we're looking at too, though, and this is the future of work. What will the future of work look like when we're paid $30,000 to $40,000? You could live with 3 or 4 friends and have $120,000 in the household. Do you really need to work? Their goal is to say that with robotics, artificial intelligence, is that a lot of what you don't want to do, you won't have to. So humans may become more like artisans, relationship experts, hanging around with family, hopefully for not more than 3 days at a time. And you all know why. But if you look at this, what might relationships look like for your kids, for your grandkids? Now, there's a few more things I'm going to add to this equation that's going to make it even a touch more murky for this. If we take a look at this idea, within our lifetimes, there will be infinite computing, infinite energy, and the cost will be ubiquitous. It's just like sunlight comes out. Maybe not in Wisconsin, but sunlight comes out. What would that do if you had no cost of energy? You could get any computing power you wanted at any point in time. What might that do? It could run neural networks. It could run a whole company. It could make everything that we need to make now without us. So the second thing I didn't tell you, there's another robot that actually introduced the very first day, and I think her name was Alexa. And she has a facial silicone that if you would touch and watch her speak, looks just like a human. But they left the other 90% of the body completely clear so you could see the inner workings. So you also now have haptics that allow virtual reality for you to feel touch. Okay, now this is what's happening with all these neural networks, with all this computing power. So I'm going to keep going a little bit here. I've got a couple more things I want to go into, and then you can start, where do these happen? So we've created a lot of new jobs being created, but here's something very interesting. 94% of jobs in the future, 94% of jobs created right now are contract jobs. Who here worked for a major company for a long time? Yeah, most of it, right? So that is probably not something of the future for your kids. How do they save when they don't have an employer who's matching? These are real ideas. You had this, you had a pension, you had this. That's going away. So take a look at, we got universal basic income, but universal retirement plans. They may put these in as well, where some of that money goes into a retirement plan for you. It was called Social Security, but it's not anymore. So the future of work is in question, and they look at this. They think down the road, sometimes 100 years out or less, you will not have to work as a human to live. You can choose to, but you don't have to. How does that change? How many people, do you know anyone whose entire identity was based on what they did, their work? You might. What does that do if that changes? So the second thing, I'm going to give you a couple more as we go through here as well, because it gets kind of interesting. There's a couple of companies on the second day. It's about longevity here. And I don't think it's about longevity for us as much as healthgevity. Nobody's interested in living 120 years, sick for 30 or 40, not being able to remember anything, right? So let me ask a question. Who would like to live healthier longer? Anybody? Yes. There are billions of dollars right now in human studies working on this. Let me give you a few examples. There's a company right now that can take human skin from 53 years old to 23 years old in 28 days. What if they could eliminate wrinkles? Might anybody have some interest here in America or the world? What happens, and think about this, they have found in a few companies that how can you take, somebody had a child, say at 40 years old, and the wife was 40 years old, how can you take two 40-year-old sex cells, a male and a female, combine them, and create something brand new? Guess what they found? Your body has a memory of what it's like to be very young. But over time, through your replicating your cells, your body forgets it and has lots of errors. So what they're finding is they have now found a way to turn your cells back to a certain age. Now, this is David Sinclair. This is occurring as well. They've done this in mice. Mice get the first of everything. But let me ask a question. So, how old are you here? So, if we didn't look at age, we didn't look at how old are you? My team says I'm 7. I say I'm about 30. But how old are you? Don't, the age isn't the issue. I just want you to start yelling. How old are you guys? Anybody? How many people are awake? Seriously, answer this question. How old are you? In your own mind, you've got a picture of who you are. What age would you want to be if you could choose to go back? What age would that be? 16. Awesome. 30. Awesome. 60. 30. Anyone else? 40. 45. These could be dials you could turn back to in health. Now here's what's amazing. One of the biggest issues with aging is what? It's a word that starts with D, and I forgot the rest. Thank you, yeah. It's dementia. So some of the biggest things we're looking at with a lot of us right now is we're worried about, and actually one of the biggest worries Americans have who are retired, you know what the biggest worry they have is? Not being able to remember things. It's health and not being able to remember things. Those are the two biggest we have. So as we have that, what are people doing about it? They have found through some of the different technologies I'll talk about in just a minute that they're able to actually affect longevity, but also the human mind. If you have, like, for instance, right now, an APOE4 gene, you're 3.6 times more likely to have dementia than anyone else. So first you got to get a genetic test, see if you had it, if you're lucky enough to get one. If you're unlucky enough to get 2, it's 26 more times likely to get dementia than anyone else. So what they do, though, is they can go in now with something called gene editing. Has anybody ever heard about this? They can actually clip that portion of your genes out and change it. Even crazier. In utero, with a child, with a fetus, they can see what this child is presented with as far as their genetics, and they can change that to be whatever it is the parents want. Think about that. So I was supposed to be, by my interest inventory, a biomedical ethicist, clergy, and a teacher. I kind of feel like I'm all three right now, but you start looking at that. Some people believe it's highly unethical to go in and change a child's eyes before they're born. Oh, I want them to be a pro athlete. Oh, you know what? If they were going to have spina bifida, if they're going to have cerebral palsy, let's edit that out. Let's edit out Down syndrome. Let's edit out some of these things. Does that change the world? So some of the benefits are great, but now, what if in that there's a bad influence? And they've got that same ability to go in and make changes to your DNA. You sure hope that what you're getting is going to, just simply be tackling those little issues you want. So what's happening, though, today, they've even got this ability. And think about this. Then we're going to talk about some more questions. So one of the companies is creating and taking your skin cells. It'll take your skin cells, and they can create any cell in the body. Even sex cells. So they believe there's a way for human beings to reproduce without having a man and a woman. Just having a single person. Growing them in a petri dish, growing them in an artificial womb, gestating them and having them come out. So one of the questions somebody asked yesterday is, what will the need for relationships be? And this is a question one of my clients said. He goes, do I ever need to get married? How about there's a possibility that no, you may not have to. Science may offer you the ability to have children as a single person. Does that change the world? Does that change the social construct of what you call your family? So these are the things that are coming with technology. So let's do this. If you're living in a world of wow now with what you're hearing, prepare for the rest of your life for this to accelerate. Why do we always talk about adaptability? Why do I bring these things up? Your family needs to know this is coming. Your family needs to understand that why great-grandpa doesn't understand 13-year-old granddaughter because she's on Snapchat 26 hours a day. Yeah, I know that's more than right. But she's found a way to replicate ours and she can be there. Well, because they don't understand what Snapchat is, they've never lived it, this person only lives it. So in families, you're going to have 5 and 6 and 7 generations being around at the same time. How well will they understand each other? Does anybody here have any family conflict that occurs? But believe you me, I know it. Don't raise your hand. I've talked to you and your kids. And those things can happen. But here's the whole point. What do we need to do with this? So let me stop for a minute. There's more that I can go through with this in longevity. They've got ways now that they believe that you could live to whatever age you want and simply just die of doing something stupid. Which is, I fell off this mountain bike, off of Pikes Peak or whatever. Versus, the state that we sometimes get to now. So here's what's interesting. For every year that they could extend human health span, it adds $3 trillion to the world economy. Trillion. That's just 1 year. And it can be even much more than that in productive humans. But let me stop for a minute. So if you start looking at this idea of universal-based income, you start looking at all the different variables that go with it, there's another thing that also can help longevity that I'm going to tell you. You're going to want to be really, really nice to your grandchildren. Maybe even your great-grandchildren. Because you want to know what one of the most effective ways to increase your lifespan is? Fecal transplants. Laugh at it. It's true. Young poop transplanted into your abdomen, let's call it, is one of the ways that you can actually extend your health span the longest. It's not what you thought, but again, it's a good reason to be really nice to your grandchildren. You're going to need donors. And you're going to want them. But here's what's interesting. These are the things that they're finding because they can run experiments now. What used to take 25 years to get from idea to reality in our healthcare system, George Church now, one of the gentlemen who's at Harvard, he started 26 companies. He tends to be at the lot of this longevity. But you're now from idea to actually being put in a human body. The vaccine we just had from Moderna was 9 months. They think they can reduce that to, I diagnose, and within a week or less, or even that same day, they've got something that will cure whatever it is you have that they've just diagnosed. This is what people are striving for, and they're making massive strides on it. With computing power, a lot of them are simply just waiting for computing power to catch up with the idea that they have. Well, this will be available someday. I'm just going to wait until that happens. What Elon Musk does, he looks for doublings that are happening in industries really small. You and I would never notice them. And then he goes into that industry and intersects the doublings before they become apparent to us. That's what he's done his whole life. He's a very smart, very odd guy. But he's kind of like a modern-day Einstein or modern-day, Benjamin Franklin. So what do I do with all this information? There's more and more I can go through. I mean, believe you me, I've got pages and pages of stuff here. But let me stop for a moment. Anybody have any questions, any ideas? More importantly, what thoughts do you have? Is anybody here a little bit blown away again? I see the faces of blown away going, oh my God, will you just stop talking? I don't really need to hear more of this. But what I really want to do with this is to give you this and arm you with these discussions are, what do you want to do with this? What can we do for memory? Well, here's what they've said. Dave Asprey, for instance. And this is a couple of different ideas from the top physicians there. Sleep, more sleep than normal, better food than normal. And all that you're going to find that degenerative diseases are is they begin to block the synapses. So think of a nerve like this. A nerve is this, and these are the synapses. Synapses, there may be 13 or 17 or 20 per nerve cell. But what happens with dementia or with Alzheimer's is it cuts those off. So what he says is to continually create more neurons and nerve connections by doing something you've never done. Learn French. Learn the piano. Learn the French piano. But you see what you're doing. You want to create more than they're actually going away. Now, somebody actually recently said this too. It's not dementia if you remember it eventually. Those senior moments you have aren't typically dementia or Alzheimer's, right? But a lot of people say, wow, I walked in this room. Anybody walk in a room and not remember why? I did it when I first got. No, I'm just kidding. But those are those moments we're all a little bit concerned with. But there's things they're doing now. What they say is allow yourself to be as healthy as possible with what we know now. They've got solutions to them as we're coming. But the things that we can do, exercise is really number 1. 2 is sleep. 3 is a great healthy diet that's not inflammatory. Because as we age, your mitochondria begin to produce inflammation rather than energy. That's why we have less energy. Because when we're young, you ever see a kid, they run around. You might have a friend who does that too at any age. They're just, they got energy all the time. Well, what happens as we age is they don't produce the energy, but they also produce inflammation. Our body, who makes us hurt. So if we can go back and actually teach the mitochondria to work properly, like they do in little kids, you can actually rejuvenate yourself. Rejuvenations become young again. So these are the things that they're working on pretty heavily that can change our... if we look at really what we do, we talk a lot about this. Money is interesting, but it isn't about what money supports. It's simply a resource to everything in your life, your family, what you want to do, how you want to do it. These all can change, though, if you have this resource down here to be able to invest in some of these ideas. I want to be healthier longer. It's called the health span. I don't want to live longer. I just like to be healthy while I am living here and contributing. So that's the key with this. I'll stop going on because there's a whole lot more that goes with it. But when we looked about it, they say there's one of them talked about the big F word. There's fear. This stuff promotes a lot of fear. There's also a lot of opportunity. Fear is good in 2 different ways, positive and negative. Positive in the sense of, I fear this so I don't do it. I don't jump off cliffs and hope a parachute opens up, right? But the other fear is bringing the future of today's problems into now. Be very careful with that. One of the biggest energy drains that we have as we get older is mentally thinking of cycling about an idea or a thought. And what they say is change your thought patterns. Learn to meditate. That's another big one. Stop watching the news. Stop bringing future problems into today. Learn to meditate. These things are massive when it comes to brain health and body health and longevity and anxiety. Somebody asked me at the last program yesterday, how do you sleep, Chris? I said, well, usually on my left side because I'm going through all this stuff. But there's so many different possibilities that go along with it. I'll stop for now, though. I can give you more and more ideas that go with it. But I think as you're seeing here, prepare for a world of wow beyond what you've ever expected. So those scientific movies you see, Tron, all these future movies, Dune and whatnot, if we live long enough, you'll see them. They're actually foreshadowing. They're not science fiction. They're science future reality. So it's a couple things we want to see. Let me stop for a minute. There may be some questions. I may have gone way too far to have you guys ask questions. But I had a gentleman yesterday who was a pastor. And he brought up the idea of, well, but what about where's God in all this? And to many of you who are Christian, it's a great point. What do I do? Well, God may allow us to do all that we're doing now, but there also may come a point, and God does this often, where, can't do that. You thought you could change the sex of the baby. You thought you could do this. You thought you could do that. Nope, I'm going to say there's an issue. You're not going to be able to do that. Having faith is still a big portion of many people's lives. But as you go through this, he also said, for everything we're talking about that's a possibility of good, remember there's an equal possibility of evil. Anybody here ever got a robocall from someplace in Nigeria posing as somebody looking for money from somebody else? Right? What if it's indistinguishable now from the signature of your kid's own voice and your kid coming from your kid's email and their cell phone? Matter of fact, you FaceTime them and it looks like them on there as well. How do you prevent fraud in that case? These are real senior issues we have. They're not senior issues, they're issues as people we have. These are the things we need to look at, protect. So I'd say, some people, well, Chris, I'm just going to eat, drink, and be merry, right? Buy a second house, all the stuff we wanted to do. Those are possibilities. But I think more importantly, addressing these kind of conversations with the people around you that you love, what could be, what could happen, what's most important to you, the most important thing you still have is purpose. Why are you still here? Why am I still here? I've retired. Chris, I've retired. I don't. Now what? Well, I've seen you guys do some amazing things. And continue with that amazing. Your family needs it. The world needs it. Gratitude needs it. Positivity needs it. And you can see that. I'll stop again. I keep saying I'll stop. But let me ask. Anyhow, I don't. There's so many things here I could continue to bring up here. But my question is to you is, do you have any questions? Are there any questions about this? There's some incredible things that your questions bring up. And no question is dumb. You can ask a question about anything. Like, what's the internet? Yeah, Byron.
Did anybody talk about how we're going to feed this world in the next decades? Coming from a farming background, how are we going to feed everything?
Yeah, it's a good question. So back in 1900, 98% of the working population worked somehow in food, right? Today it's less than 1.8. They believe it will become almost infinitesimally small. They are doing aeroponics. So actually, I do have an answer for this one too. Each compartment I can talk about, I can go on for an hour, but I won't. Here's one sample. New York City, if they take 15 high-rise buildings and they do aeroponics, they can forever feed with fresh vegetables and fish the entire city. So I'm on a seafood diet. When I see food, I eat it. I'm just kidding. I didn't mean make you choke on it. Yeah, exactly. But when you look at it, when you look at what they can do with aeroponics, they are looking at this. Matter of fact, John Deere, how many farmers are going to have to be in a new John Deere tractor? Have you seen it? 0. It'll be able to plant fields without a farmer. Now, for my farmer clients, they're like, well, how are you going to raise cattle? How about this? There's more and more that can go in, but let me give you this idea. Right now, they're taking the best meat you can possibly find, cellular reproducing it, and when you try it and eat it, it's indistinguishable from the meat that was in a cow. It's called cellular biology. So they're cellularly making meat by reproducing the cells. It's exactly what you eat, but it just never had to be in a cow. It was only in a cow for the seed cell that created all of it. There's another company out there called Colloidal that's actually bringing back, everybody heard of a mastodon? They found it in Siberia, right? This company is literally set up to bring back extinct species, and it's in the process of bringing back the mastodon right now. So when you're going down the street, oh man, I just hit a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Those doggone T-Rex babies are eating all my cats. All my whatever. But maybe there's a reason they were extinct, but there's companies bringing back. Every day, 40 to 50 animals go extinct. I know I'm still blathering on about the question, but yes, they are talking about how to feed the people that are there in the world. And if we live this long, we're going to need to feed them longer. We're also going to need to move it into zones where we can actually plant food versus in places that are going to become deserts if we continue to heat up. But they're talking about radical concepts to capture a lot of the carbon in the environment, to recool the environment back to where it was 50 and 100 years ago. So the answer is yes. They're heavily talking about that. One gentleman actually in Denver, his goal is for all humanity to create something where for $250 a month you can live sustainably. That's where you live, eating, living, and everything as well. So it's creating communities where you can live for $250 a month. So that's his massive transformative. So here's the cool thing. For 9 years I've been there. People gave us ideas of companies years ago, and to watch them come out and be billion-dollar companies on the market is one of the coolest things, because you heard a guy just say, I'm thinking about, and he professed that to all of us. Just this year, a guy 6 years ago had started a company about resorts around the world, and they're all virtual. And he just went public for a couple of $100 million on this idea that he had right in front of us. It's kind of fun. But anyway, so back to the farm idea. There's a new thing called AgVisor Pro. AgVisor Pro is connecting every farmer in the world with a database on how to best grow crops in their area with the best agricultural experts in the world. So I met the guy, and I've known him for quite a few years. So the answer is they are heavily thinking about how do they feed us, but not just the food, our micronutrients, the things we really need in our body. So for instance, I could walk in, and my Whoop band here, which has measured my activity for the day, says, I've burned 2,700 calories, whatever it was, and these are the nutrients you need. By the time I come home, that could literally show up in my food-making portal. It would 3D print it, it's perfect food, and it replaces exactly what you need. And I'm not sure if you're like me, but this year I started with a goal of losing 10 pounds, and I've only got 15 to go. That could be helpful. Again, the seafood diet doesn't help. Corn, by the way, is the best sweetener for anything in the world. It makes the most sugars. It's very easy, lowest cost to be sugars. So they're going to face a lot of these things, a lot of the bacteria they create. One thing I didn't talk about as well that kind of grows from it as well is called cycles. Anybody here a fan of Grateful Dead? I know 2 of them left a little bit ago. So there's a gentleman, Paul, who actually hung around with the dead many years ago, and they thought, he's just a society dropout. He is the one who helped with psychedelic mushrooms. And they're finding that microdosing of psychedelic mushrooms is one of the massive reductions in the effects of Alzheimer's, dementia, also Parkinson's and others. And it's microdosing to a certain level with vitamin A or some other vitamins. He's got a whole fund started with $300 or $400 million in it that's simply doing experiments to put this into human beings. Not that human beings aren't already doing it, as he said it. But they're microdoses. So it's not the macro dose where you think that the trees are speaking to you, which somebody said they had friends do that, none of you. But as you go back to it, so this is happening in the biological sciences as well. Literally changing, they say for anxiety, sleep, longevity, and just your human capacity, mind expansion, they say that microdosing these mushrooms might be something you, just like a supplement you take every day or grow in your backyard. Yeah, so it's crazy. But yeah, the bushels, the things they can do, the health of the food that they make. The health of the food they had 100 years ago versus today, it's like was 8 to 10 times healthier then than today because of what we do to leach the vegetables out. And then the soil, I'm sorry, he asked one question, I give you 10 answers. The soil, they're talking about microorganic growth, and basically they didn't realize that there's a network just like the internet amongst organisms in the soil and moss and other things that help things grow much healthier. So they're looking at what might those organisms need to be to grow healthy food, once again. So the answer is absolutely Byron. Great question. Sorry about a 10-minute answer, but this is all up here, and I have to get it out. Great question. Anyone else? Anybody afraid to ask a question now? Yeah. Yes, John. How are we applying this to investing? We're not. This is just talking. No. How do you apply this to investing? So a few times, what you're finding in investing is understanding when somebody tells you they're investing in blockchain, what they're really doing. When they're talking about Web 3.0 and it's nascent and basically they're investing a ton of money but they don't know what they're doing with it yet. So a lot of our managers are beginning this process. So in the conversations we're having, if somebody wants to put some money in something that's super exciting but also could be, also is at risk. So in other words, if I have $20,000, I just want to put on a bet. There's things you can purchase that take advantage of these technologies. They're investing in them very early. They could do very well, but they could also go to zero. So you have to have a much higher risk tolerance for those. So we have those available. What I really want to do, why I go to this to apply it to investing, is I want to provide hope. We're in a world that seems presently, right now, like Ken had said with his wife, why would we want to raise kids? Actually, I had a client once say this, why would I want to raise kids in this world? My response is, why wouldn't you? This is the best time ever. And the worst of time. I think Styx had an album that was called The Best of Times and the Worst of Times. And it was the same time. It's how you view it. So the biggest thing you can do as well is mindset for longevity, mindset for this as well. It helps to cement the mindset. If you want positive news every single day, I've got something called Future Loop from Peter Diamandis that you can watch about the latest technological improvements that are occurring. And it will give you hope every day that great people are doing great things. They haven't just gone, oh, screw it, which is what the news media would believe you or have you to believe today. So it's more meta and also individual. That's a great question, though. How are we applying this to investing? Every way. Every way. So I go to it, again, to be a scout, to see what's out there, but bring back these pieces of things. There's way more we could, but I want one question you can see there's more that goes with it. But I want to let you know, we're there, we're watching, we're seeing it, we're talking about it. What decisions do we need to make now? What decisions might we need to make in the future? But those are very important to know. And that's how we can provide you guidance on it. It's unique to what we do. There's only about 7 to 10 financial advisors in it that I know of, and then only about 6 of us have been there the whole time. But it's kind of unique. It's a great question. Anyone else? Well, here's what I want to do. Thank you tremendously for your time. I know that it gets to be overwhelming at some point here. Remember, I sit through this for 3 straight days, and about an hour and a half or 2 in, I feel like you do right now. So you have to go in with this idea of what am I going to take from it? What am I going to get from this? Because the opportunities are endless. Prepare for a world of wow. Prepare for a world of beyond your expectations. That's what you want for your children. You want to prepare your children for adaptability, for volatile times, for the unknown. You also want to be open to the possibilities that they're going to do something you don't even understand. I work in ribonucleic acid. What is that? Well, I work in the protein number 53. Your whole career is working in protein 53? Yeah. Turns out we've got other people who do it too. I'm glad you do that because I don't know what you're talking about, right? But be open to that. But with you guys anyway, thank you tremendously. This is really meant to bring you some different ideas. What I have as well at the very end here, and I was going to show it at the other portion of the program, is a lot of the clients that aren't with us anymore. I've got this at the very end. I don't want to show it necessarily now. I'll show it to you guys another time. But this is all of my team. They spend a tremendous amount of time putting this together, allowing me to go to this for 2 or 3 days and bring this back to you, as well as doing meetings and discerning it. I want to give them a huge hand for allowing this and really putting this together. So if I may, for those here. And thank you, most importantly, for your time, your listening, for your trust in us. Another thing I want to make sure you know, your trust in us, we understand is paramount. You trust us to bring this to you. You trust us to bring you data. You don't always have to come to these kind of programs to do this, but a lot of you do, and we appreciate that. You are why we do this. We're in the human. So people ask, what business are you in? I tell them, I'm in the people business. I'm in the human business. I want to help them accomplish whatever they want to accomplish from here on out. If my bend is finances, which is how we help many people, or if it's in helping people live healthier longer, I want to introduce you to some of those ideas. More importantly, I want to help you with your mindset, making sure you're not living worried, in fear, and in this diseased state of the mind all your life. We want to offer you hope. We want to offer you, make sure, discovering your purpose. One thing you're going to see is going to come from Jenny. We're going to start talking about purpose. What's our purpose from here on out? If you had an extra 10 or 20 healthy years from right now, what would you do? A second career? Volunteer another way? Build more tables for me at Gentian? That's for Byron, yes. So anyway, I want to offer those to you because there is a strong possibility of us getting an additional year, 2, 3, 4 years of healthy life and beyond. What will we do with those? You can lay in the hammock, but you can only check the pool temperature so many times in a day. So with that, I want to thank you tremendously. Thank you from our team. I want to appreciate your time. Any questions you have for me, if they're really difficult, I'll refer them to Ken or somebody else. But I'd love to be able to talk with you more about this. So thank you for your time and allowing us to do this and really be hopefully a guide for you. Thank you.